There are photographs that document, and there are photographs that feel. This one, it doesn't ask to be understood, it just stares back. A young man, slumped, broken, gripping his head like he's trying to stop everything from caving in. Not a rock star, not a legend, just Kurt Cobain. Shot in Seattle, September 1990. Before Nevermind. Before the world began to pull him apart. This is not just a photo. This is a moment the myth couldn't cover up. And we're still looking at it 30 years later, wondering how much pain a frame can hold. I asked my husband if there were any photos he wanted me to look at, and he chose this photo of Kurt Cobain, and he wanted to know the story behind it. And I'm so glad he did, because it's so interesting and it's not something that I had seen before. So this photo that I'm looking at, but all the photos included in this video, were taken by Ian Tilton in Seattle on the 22nd of September 1990. Ian Tilton was there taking photos of the performance by Nirvana. Quick fact, this was pre-Dave Grohl. This was the only show with drummer Dan Peters, but Dave Grohl was in the audience. So the photographer captured a lot of photos of Kurt on stage performing and then smashing equipment, guitars, amps, causing a ruckus, as they did, those grungy boys. And he followed him off stage and took 3 photos in succession of each other, about a minute apart. This was one of those photos. It has been reported that Ian Tilton did ask for consent to take the photo of Kirk that we see, which is good because it feels so invasive looking at this photo. So hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better about viewing the image. But the photographer did state he saw Kurt was in this really vulnerable state. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know whether to photograph it. So he asked for consent. Kurt said yes, and then after that he was consoled. This photo wasn't edited by the photographer. It was a raw, real photograph. And I think we can all see the photographers captured Kurt in a moment of like pure human emotion. The photographer allowed Kurt to be himself, to be messy, to be raw, express himself. And it's just such a powerful image. So this photo happened after the performance where he smashed everything up and did all the bad boy smashing. Why do they smash guitars? They're so expensive. Anyway, it's been reported that Kurt just felt so overwhelmed, he just needed to get out his emotions and his feelings, and they came out in this photo, as we see. Just looks distraught, really. And I think this shows that Kurt really felt his performances. He took performing seriously, and he was like a genuine artist. He wrote really deep, raw, emotional music and lyrics. And this photo shows that he felt it. He wasn't performing to put on a show. So knowing this, it gives validity to his persona that we know of. The myth, the man, the legend, that he was a deep, emotional, somewhat troubled man. But he wasn't performing. He wasn't putting on this persona. It was real. It was true. And this photo represented that. It's not just a character. That's what I'm trying to say. So why is this photo so powerful? We all know Kurt Cobain was the voice of this generation. Generation X? Yeah. The grunge movement, his way of being famous was to be authentic and raw and real. No pretense, just everything, all your cards on the table. This is how I feel. Kind of like a new punk, but probably a bit more emotional and allowing feelings and pain and suffering and sadness. So on the surface, this photo was the personification of Kurt Cobain, a guy who was leading a generation, changing the way we perceived famous musicians. And I suppose it's interesting to see a man just completely open about their feelings. Like even now in 2025, it's a lot more acceptable for men to cry, but it's still like a big issue that men don't want to be seen as weak from crying. But this photo shows how powerful it can be. I also find it interesting that this photo was taken after a show, a performance, where you'd expect the emotions to be different. You'd expect excitement, buzzing. They've just done this great performance. People loved it. You've performed your music. You kind of expect that like happy buzz. Whereas this like completely challenges that. He looks broken. He looks exhausted, and he looks in the middle of a breakdown, just crying. And it's not something you expect to see. And I guess that's another reason why it's so striking. So it gives us a new perspective on those post-show feelings that performers have. So I want to just look a little bit into the body language of the photo. And everything I speak about, of course, is my opinion. I'd love to know what your opinion is. So the pose to me is almost childlike. It's small. He is holding his head like he's in pain, but also like he's trying to cover himself. He looks vulnerable, he looks small, he looks fragile. The holding of the head and with the expression in his face, it looks like he's in physical pain. But it also could be he's trying to shield himself from the world at that moment because he felt so vulnerable from the emotion. And this is reflected in the position where he's kind of crouched over, his knees are in front of his body. So it's like he's trying to protect himself physically from the outside. Maybe just for that moment he needed time on his own, and crouching and covering yourself makes you feel a bit more protected and undercover. And I wondered if this feeling of needing protecting was a response from the violence on the stage of smashing up the guitars and the equipment and that pure adrenaline of maybe this was his unconscious reaction to that violence. Even though he did it, he just needed that moment to gather himself and just sit with himself and sit with his thoughts. This photo, knowing it was taken after a show, kind of is the opposite of what you expect to see of a performer, especially the lead of a band. You expect, like I said previously, happiness, but even like showmanship and putting on a front and knowing there's photographers around. You'd think that they'd want to portray a certain feeling after this show, but it was like the complete opposite. He just looked like he'd collapsed to his knees, which could be exhaustion as well. I mean, they've just played a massive show and smashed everything up. But you can see the like complete collapse in his body, emotionally and physically. And at that point, he's not Kurt Cobain, the legend, the megastar. He's just a bloke that's having a moment to himself. Because this photo feels so sad and so kind of upsetting to see, it feels like we're peering into a situation we shouldn't be. And of course, we know that the photographer got consent from Kurt to take the photo, but it feels like we shouldn't be seeing this moment. The fact he's covering himself, the body language of the photo, it feels invasive. And I think that kind of triggers a part in humans where we want to kind of know why. Like we're nosy. We're a nosy bunch of humans. We want to know why somebody's reacting like that and figure out what's causing this emotional response. In modern day, we know a lot of what we see is curated, is intentional. So when we see a photo that triggers like raw emotion from us, and it makes us stop and think like, what is he feeling? What was happening? Why was this photo taken? It creates an intimate connection with the photo And with Kurt, a lot of people have a connection with him as a musician. And obviously we know what happened to him, unfortunately. We knew he was a deep person. He had a deep personality. He wrote raw, emotional music. And this photo helps us develop a more intimate connection with him. We still expect the life of a famous celebrity, famous musician to be perfect, and that they're having a great time all the time and nothing goes wrong. But Kurt Cobain was a great example of somebody who didn't shelter his fans and the general public from his troubles. And this is just a representation of that. It shows messiness, it shows imperfection, it shows pain, and it shows uncertainty. We can guess that it was adrenaline and he just needed to lay it out, but we don't know what was happening to him in his personal life. I hope you enjoyed this quick analysis of the Kurt Cobain photo. I appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed today's video, like and subscribe, please. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.